Derivatives trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results.
So stressful when the world's on fire. Good God. I can't look at this, guys. Like, my strategy is you buy it and you hope that you got a good spot. Yeah, but we all think you're crazy. You don't fight this. No way. The markets are freaking out and you don't think that anything is wrong? Come back tomorrow and I'll lose it all. Should be fun.
Good morning, everybody. So we got PPI this morning. I tried to be here super early so that we have everything started here. Let's just go through the charts really quickly. The 10-year treasury is substantially higher overnight. And we had an auction yesterday that was pretty good too. So that was enough to finally clear out that downside that we had from the non-farms last week. We'll see what PPI does though, because last time around PPI ended up giving us a lot more insight into what's going on than the CPI did. They were both light. But so let's just keep that in mind, that PPI could be a pretty big mover. ES is a little bit lower though. Oh, you know, and I totally forgot about this, but another factor driving the treasuries yesterday was Iran nuclear deal talks kind of falling apart. The IAEA or whatever it's called, ruling that they've broken the rules, and chatter that Israel could just strike Iran at any moment. Which also means oil substantially higher. I tell you what, man, if you had caught that at 61, you are swimming in it right now. That's a big move in oil. Gold is doing okay. You know, there's been some fractures here. There's been some big downside moves that have kind of made us go like, oh, maybe gold doesn't have it right now compared to silver, which is just amazing looking at silver. Copper still just kind of was not really doing anything too interesting yet. And the Japanese yen, well, this is interesting. The Japanese yen strengthening, perhaps this last little bit on geopolitical flight to safety concerns, but the dollar weakening and now below 98. So, yeah, oil had an amazing upside move. I wonder where they're gonna say we're at with the dollar, because the thing that continues to astound me about the dollar is that people don't realize that the dollar being in the upper 90s is relatively strong. That is not saying, hey, you should go and buy the dollar. I kind of think that it's the opposite, that the dollar could fall considerably more. And I guess it bothers me because these people, they act like this is a super bad thing. And I don't really see it that way. Okay, so that's where we got. We got 4 minutes. I'm going to eat and be relatively quiet here. And then we can talk after the PPI releases. Ayo, you said there, ZB order flow looks been watching it for some time. Looks what? You saying it looks like something? Lots of pulling. Wow, okay, sure. But we're going into news here, right? Yeah, it looks good. Okay. Well, 30 seconds. Thought I was going to finish before, but not quite. The micros have definitely pulled. Well, it looks like my financial juice disconnected on me. Okay, but we are a little bit higher there. Okay, US headline PPI month over month, spot 1. And core PPI month over month, spot 1 versus spot 3. So, again, huge surprise. And they are moving up, though not as aggressively as yesterday. I don't think I can trade this. Maybe I could hit into the lows, but okay, my robot is gonna take a long here, I guess. It's a little late, but okay. Okay, so I almost forgot. U.S. initial jobless claims 248 versus 242, slightly higher than expected. Continued jobless claims 1.956 million versus the expected 1.91 million and the previous reading of 1.904. So that's what? 56,000 more people on continued jobless claims? Not good. We're going to get over 2 million. It seems, though, everything is aligned for treasuries to buy. And let me tell you something. We have a 30-year auction today. And if that 30-year auction is good, because it's been the longer end of the curve that's been struggling, if that longer auction is good, that could really affect the curve. And then I'll go and I'll do a victory dance and dunk on all of the people on the bonds subreddit that thought that the bond auction was going to be the end of the treasury market. Okay, so we are getting a pretty significant retracement. Robot is a little underwater. This is why I don't take this trade. Every time that I try and go off of the imbalance on a news thing, I just end up getting a bad position. But that's 04 is maybe kind of a spot to watch. If we get substantially below 04, it might give me a buying opportunity. It looks like the liquidity in the micro yields, you know, it's not perfect. Still a 2-tick spread, but it's better than it was yesterday. Okay, so AO says that UB is near lows. That is curious. I don't have UB up, but the 30-year is certainly, I would say, back to where it was before the news was released. And if we come over to the charts, we do see a little bit of steepening. So the short end of the curve reacted to that, but the longer end, not so much. So maybe they need the auction for the rest of the curve to catch up, or maybe this is a bad omen for the auction. But it's kind of making me feel like that the reaction to this news makes the auction today even more important. Octavius, yeah, he's right. Weird flows. It is a little weird. They are taking a spread trade here for sure. They are steepening the curve even further. Can you imagine? Oh man. Can you imagine if we went into if we went into a recession and the yield curve just got even steeper? Like we go from this world where like everything is insanely flat forever and ever, never, never, never. And then it just, you know, when the recession happens, the steepening is just insane, right? Short-term interest rates crash and the long-term interest rates don't change. That would be a problem, I think. Like, I don't know, I don't have to think about this a little while, but because the yield curve always steepens when we're going into a recession. Like it being really, really super flat is kind of like a sign that we are about to have a recession. But like when it steepens back out is like when the recession is happening. So, is there a point at which this steepening is too much? And because we're having problems with debt issuance, that the yield curve steepening out that much becomes a significant problem? Because it's always been like, well, it steepens out, but interest rates overall have still all decreased. But if you had a situation where it steepened so much that the longer end interest rates did not come down much at all, I think that would be a problem for the economy. We'll probably still bounce. Yeah, I do kind of like it for a bounce, but what I'm seeing so far kind of makes me think that I probably shouldn't get involved. If the deal with China is going well, there's no recession. Okay, but here's the thing. I don't think that it is. Like, the deal with China that they're talking about is still 55% tariffs. So that's not that good. Told you about a recession about 5 months ago. It was about, well, let's see here. It's June. So February. Before their trade war really got started. Oh man, that was a sneeze. But I think when you were talking about a recession, it was for different reasons, yeah? I do still think, again, I see some fractures in the economy. I'm a little bit concerned about the economy still possibly going into recession. And not necessarily because of the trade war. I would still be concerned right now, even if like Kamala Harris had been elected. Because I'm concerned about a situation where the interest rates stay high for too long, and that creates a reinforcing loop that throws the economy into recession. And what I'm seeing right now with interest rates is just kind of increasing the chances of that happening. I'm not going to say that it's like the most likely scenario, but it's still an elevated risk. Now, what's this one loan put contract at 111.08 to 18,000 calls? But right now he's winning, isn't he? Well, maybe not winning. Depends on how much he paid for it, right? By the way, how did they price those options out? Did they price them in numbers of ticks? Or do you have to do conversions? Showed me a picture yesterday. What does the picture say? Yeah, that image doesn't have prices on it. No. I mean, like, what is the price for the individual put or call quoted in? Is it quoted in dollars or is it quoted in ticks? So that I can say, I paid 8 ticks for it, ergo, my break even for that put contract is actually at 111.16 or something like that. They're quotes and ticks. So then the question is, how much did you pay for it? When is he in the money? Where is that particular contract in the money, rather? Or rather, based on the current price, of course, because we don't know what he paid for it. I don't keep all the data on the screen, but the little red and green dashes on the picker I sent you indicates when the contracts are in the money or out. Oh, really? That's really interesting. Okay. They changed. Yeah, I get you. That's interesting. Oh yeah, whoops. So Uzi was saying negative delta building here for both ZB and ZN. So when we look at ZN, we've definitely declined since the peak of the news. We're getting a little bit of selling here. But when you look at it in ZB, there's something's really happening in ZB. They're really selling it. Euro is strong. Yeah, dollar has gotten much weaker here. Kind of funny because the whole thing is we want lower interest rates, which means probably we would like the economic data to come in a little bit weak here. But if we fall into recession, the US probably has to print their way out of it. But that's not good for trying to reduce the amount of debt that we have out there and therefore weakens the dollar. I think that's why that's selling and why the euro seems strong right now. So look at this. Just as soon as it looked like there was a lot of selling in ZB, they have rocketed back up to the highs and the entire yield curve is flattening back out. That is very interesting. I was mentioning negative delta because it was being absorbed seemingly. I did not notice that, but in retrospect, it would appear that you are correct. O2 and 0.5? Oh, 0.5 in the treasury. Wait, why 0.5 on that side? That O2 definitely is like, what the heck? Like, you might argue, oh, there's the distribution there, right? But I actually think that it looks disorganized in ZB. And I would say this is kind of disorganized in ZN. Right? But maybe if we go and we look at the spread, if we were able to kind of differentiate the volume, maybe we would see it more clear in the spread. Wow, you sweated that out the whole time, Octavius? That sure worked out for you, didn't it? What's going on over here in the micros? That doesn't make much sense. I think that 356 is probably better and more accurate than 346. But why are they holding such a huge spread? Right, this is at its lows, this is not. But maybe it's because of the ZB having caught up here. Right, because sometimes these two don't follow as closely as you'd think, because the difference between what is actually a 7-year and a 10-year is sometimes bigger than the difference between a 10-year and a 30-year, believe it or not. And maybe we would have to look at UB, because UB probably rocketed out there, huh? Fact, UB is the biggest winner today, up 1.16%. I actually think, well, I can't really say for sure, but it appears to me that we are up more than we were yesterday. Well, let's try measuring it. Drawing tools, ruler. I think that little spike there doesn't count, so we're going to say from here to here. Not quite. But it is if you count with yesterday, if you said yesterday was from here. Then we're up more on the day. Okay. Yes, how are you? I haven't seen you. Well, you were here last week, weren't you? It's been a minute. There are some icebergs trading here in ZN. Donald Trump tweeting on Truth Social that the China deal is great. How are you? Well, I'm doing okay for now. But we're in a period of transition, so I should have a much better, clearer picture of where things are going for me maybe in a week or two. Maybe by the end of this week. Maybe today. We'll see. The place that I'm working, they're going through some big changes. They're going from a pretty small local company to a more mid-sized company, and really switching from what used to be like a hardware company into more of a software company. And that's kind of also meaning the software company changing their focus, things like that. And so they're making changes. And then my contract is coming up here, and they're trying to hire me, but like, you know, HR is still working it out. So lots of uncertainty on the job right now. But it seems to be going well for me. They've had a lot of contractors, and apparently they didn't like some of the contractors, but I think they like me. So where are you now? Well, I guess I probably shouldn't say the exact name of the company, but it's just the company that's involved in school stuff. Make things for schools. Yeah. Well, that's exciting how all goes well. Yeah. I guess when I think about that, the thing that I try and I'm really trying to transmit here is, okay, like, where am I actually invested, right? Well, which industry I work in matters too, right? And the industry in this case is education, which really changes things. It's going to be different from the rest of the tech industry, right? Which could be good or bad. If schools are able to continue to invest in these sorts of things, that could be good. But with the Republican administration, you're probably not going to get as much federal money involved in those sorts of things right now, right? So that's bad. But I don't think that they have a lot of market saturation. So I think they have a lot of room to go. I see a lot of opportunity in that. Oh, man. So just see this comment on Reddit. Society has become too allergic to violence for its own detriment. Oh, okay. I don't know if I'm going to read that one out loud, but surely the reason that is coming out is because there have been protests against Donald Trump's anti-immigration policies and ICE enforcing the law in a way that hasn't been enforced since George Bush, and pretty large protests against that. Well, let's say, because I don't know how big they are relatively speaking. It seems big to me, but these ones are quite disruptive. Quite disruptive. And the argument right now I'm seeing is whether or not they're actually violent protests. It is like if 10,000 people come and 1% of them are involved in rioting, that's like 100 people, right? So you can come in and you can say, well, because 99% of people were behaved, that means that it was a peaceful protest. I don't agree with that. I think that is people exploiting your human brain and the way that we kind of look at normal distributions, right? Yeah, this is something that you have to measure similarly to site reliability engineering. In site reliability engineering, we are measuring things in like number of decimal places, right? Because you probably are 99% of the time, but up 99% of the time is like, could be down for a day or two every year. Is that really that good for you? For the person using the service? No. For a lot of services, people would be like, well, screw this. If it was trading and it was down for a day, we'd be like, screw this, right? So you have to measure it decimal places out. It can't be 99. It has to be like 99.9999. Right? And it's the same with protests. Like for me to call it a peaceful protest, I think that it would have to be like 99.999% peaceful. And right now it's only 99% peaceful. So on this scale, they are not peaceful. Yeah, the nationwide stuff is going to happen on Saturday. So here's another thing that I see. The tactics that the left tends to use, and I'm not trying to use this in a derisive way, like I'm a conservative and this is the way that they act, and I am trying to give you like, here are the patterns that you're going to see in how the left tends to behave and how these things tend to go, and ergo, so that you can kind of sort out how these things matter for markets, right? The way that it happened in Russia was that people protested, and then there was an incident. I think that some protesters died, right? And then the Tsar reacted in a certain way, and that was kind of what triggered the communist revolution, right? And what I have noticed is that the left kind of was like, okay, that's what worked. And ever after that, everything that they do always tries to follow that same template. So they will have a protest. They'll say the protest is mostly peaceful, but there will be some agitators. And those agitators, even if it's not like a huge thing, like they're not destroying property and nobody's really getting hurt, but they are agitating with the police. And the intention is to get the police to do something that creates headlines and creates sympathy for the protesters. That's the game. So the risk for the Republicans is a protester dies, right? That would be the worst thing that could happen is Saturday comes and a protester dies, and then people have sympathy for the protesters. Doesn't always work out that way. Remember that in the Kent State riots, protesters died, and the majority of Americans sided with the police. So it doesn't always work out that way in the United States, right? But that's the template that the left always uses. So there's going to be the nationwide stuff on Saturday. It is kind of supposed to be like a strike or something, which is where I'm kind of like, okay, well, because it's on a Saturday, I don't know if you're really you're really showing a lot. You show it on a Saturday, but that's okay. It's going to happen on a Saturday. There's a risk there. That's bad for the administration, right? But if everybody keeps their head cool, it could just happen and people forget about it. There is one of these sort of dynamics that can go on where like things escalate and escalate and escalate, and then it escalates as high as it can get and nothing happens, and then it completely de-escalates and everybody forgets about it. Zero sympathy for the meat. Why are you calling them meatball people? I have heard people say that the size and spread of these riots is quite small relative to other things that have happened in LA. So I've also seen a poll that showed a 40% increase in Trump support among legal immigrants. So actually, this is a good question for Uzi, because I think you probably remember us talking about this at the beginning of the year, right? It's like, well, Donald Trump is going to come in, he's going to start enforcing immigration law, and then we find out how dedicated people actually are to this, because once you start enforcing immigration law, you're going to see the left bring out all the tiers and you know, just making a really big bit about it, and we'll see if people still have the stomach to continue enforcing immigration law. And I said, you know, I think that it will be harder to maintain that than Donald Trump thinks. And so far, I think I've been wrong about that. Haven't really seen support in Donald Trump drop off of this. Haven't really seen like increased sympathy for illegal immigration off of this. In fact, what I'm seeing is the protests just causing conservatives to double down even harder on it. You know? Like conservatives are seeing the protests kind of hurting the left, and it's emboldening the conservatives. I mean, the protests just seem to be worsening the left position. They started on the wrong side of it. Yeah. Like it seems like another one of those, the far left staking out the wrong side of a 60-40 issue. It really does. But there's another thing, and I guess this is just maybe another way of saying what I've already said here. But I think that this one tweet that I saw like really kind of puts it in perspective for me, is that the intention here is we're going to protest against Donald Trump, and then people are going to lose the stomach for the immigration enforcement, and they'll move towards the liberal position. I mean, isn't that the intention of the protesters? Is to weaken immigration enforcement? And what's happening is Donald Trump and conservatives are saying, well, if we give in here on this, then nobody else will ever try and enforce immigration law ever again, ever after this. It'll just be proven to be too toxic of an issue, and we will forever be open borders and more and more people will vote left, and it will be just a complete demographic nightmare for conservatives. Like, that's the sentiment that I see on the right. So they're going to double down. They're going to double down. And I thought maybe people would lose the stomach for it. It's not happening. It's not happening at all. Yeah, sentiment. I mentioned that. You maybe didn't hear that part of it. He just passed more taxes last week so that they can go to illegal immigrant shelters. I don't know about that, but it's just a very interesting, I'm trying to keep myself unattached in terms of like, what do I think they should do and all these sorts of things. I mean, personally, I really don't like the immigration system that we have. And I can't say that I necessarily have a good solution to it. I'm not convinced that the solution is just really aggressively enforce immigration law and all of the illegal immigrants will leave and then we can turn around and do immigration reform. I don't think it's going to happen that way. So I don't know what you do, but that's not my job. My job is to try and predict and see how it's relevant to the world and as it develops and the markets in particular. It is relevant to markets because that is labor that you're not going to have here. It's going to have economic impacts. It is less population. It's going to have economic impacts. But what I'm seeing right now is the trajectory is less illegal immigration in the future. Yeah. May have mentioned it while I was putting laundry in the bin. Oh, heck. That's why the protests are funded by billionaires. I've seen a lot of... So you know what really bothers me the most about the protests, though? Like here's something where I can explicitly say, I don't like this. I don't like what I'm seeing. Well, okay, so there has been reports about, like, who are funding this? There are NGOs involved. Is this actually coming from government funding? I think that they have some circumstantial evidence saying that those sorts of things are happening. Even if we get to the bottom of it and it does look like they're in, like federal people are investigating this, I think it's still kind of hard to quantify to what effect that is, Like if we say it's not organic in particular, I don't know if we can really truly prove that, even though I would say you're probably right. If it was not for the NGOs and the money involved, you probably wouldn't be having these protests. My observation has always been that it's the same set of Democrat activists doing everything, and if they didn't have money, they wouldn't be doing it. But then the other thing on this side is, like I'll go on the Utah subreddit and I'll see people saying, ICE went and did something, or like police detained my uncle. And there's all of these rumors. There's all these people making these claims. I think there's a big part of this saying that the due process and rights of illegal immigrants are being abused by ICE. And I see a lot of people on Reddit saying this, and I don't see any evidence of it. So why is it that all of a sudden on this, it's okay for everything to just be rumor mongering? Because before it was, if you said anything that wasn't super backed up by the proper news source, and right, it had to be CNN, couldn't be a right-wing source, then you were wrong, you were dismissed with you're spreading misinformation. And now I'm seeing a lot of, like, straight up spreading of misinformation, and we don't care. What's with that? We don't care. And yeah, maybe we're spreading misinformation on the funding thing too, because again, like I see some circumstantial evidence that that's happening, but I haven't seen definitive proof. So all of the sudden, we've moved back into this world where we don't care that information is verified. It wasn't this the whole argument for the last decade? Was that we need all of the information to be verified and we shouldn't be spreading misinformation online? Like, seriously. It's kind of funny because I think for the protesters' sake, they would probably benefit from ensuring that all of the information that they're sharing is backed. Because I think what's going to happen now is conservatives are going to, not like conservatives in general or like conservative leadership, but like individual conservatives that want to undermine the protesters are going to take advantage of that and feed the protesters bad information. Go and have them go and protest in an area where nothing's actually happening, for instance. Or like this thing where a guy was going around to protests and putting Trump stickers on all of the cars in the hopes that the protesters would start attacking their own cars. Can you believe? Haha, if we cared for misinformation and tried to fix it in any way, wouldn't everyone immediately scream at Trump for being a monster trying to lie online? No, because we need to fix the information by having the liberal news media be gatekeepers. That wasn't that always the argument? They had a good run there for a while, but treasuries have settled back down. And it looks to me like the robot shall soon here in a few minutes take a loss. Take a 3-tick loss. Yeah. The more that this goes on, the more I'm thinking I think that the auction is a big factor today. But you know what? I think that the auction's going to be good. Even though ZB has been lagging and we're getting the steepening and everything, there still appears to be some demand. The treasury auction yesterday was stellar. And really the main reason why we're concerned about the 30-year auction was because the 20-year auction was bad. But I think that that's mostly a factor of that particular spot on the yield curve. I don't think it's going to be the same for the 30. So I'm hoping that the 30-year auction comes out. It's good. Demand is strong. And then, the curve kind of chills out and the treasuries continue to float up. Plus, we could get more negative headlines on Iran, so that could also help the treasuries. Is endless economic growth impossible? No, it's not, because you will always have efficiency improvements. There may be a time, though, where economic growth from population growth will end. That will require adjustments from the governments of the world. Tested last week's high and it held. Was that? Okay. Well, not maybe in ZN, but maybe in the other ones. But we did not get past last week's high. That's true. Let me see here the chart. The high was like way up there at 14.5. So I wouldn't call that a test of the high, but I would say that there was somewhat of a test of levels from last week that we appear to have failed on. And more particularly, we have gotten volume the other way. I mean, like when you look at it in ZN overall, we are short about 17,000 contracts, which doesn't necessarily make sense because PPI is supposed to be pretty significant news, right? But it seems to me that in a situation where that's probably the most important macroeconomic news that we could get, the macroeconomic news doesn't matter as much because the auction and what's going on with Iran might be a bigger flow. So, well, let's come in here. Let's see. How much time do we have left? You know what? It's been a long hour today. Don't believe the Riot videos. It's the algorithms. Okay. Well, it would certainly be the case that the cameras are going to show the worst behavior. Right? But I want to read about core producer price growth slides to the lowest since August as companies eat tariff costs. Following another month of cooler than expected CPI, U.S. producer prices followed and printed well below expectations in May, if not quite the plunge observed last month, rising only spot 1 below the spot 2 month-over-month expected. But we note that just like March's 0.4 month-over-month decline was revised up to unchanged, so May's negative 0.5 drop has also been revised higher to negative spot 2. Meanwhile, the headline print posted a modest increase, rising from an upward revised 2.5% in April to 2.6% in May. But while headline PPI posted a modest annual increase, core PPI continued to slide, rising just 3% in May, the lowest since August of 2024, down from an upward revised 3.2% in May as a result of a 0.1% monthly increase in core PPI, which also missed expectations of a spot 3% increase. Looking at the PPI components that matter for PCE calculation, airline passenger services contracted another 1.1% month-over-month in May after a 1.8% decline in April. Portfolio management contracted 1% after a 7.1% decline in April. Home health and hospice care flat, and hospital outpatient care contracted 0.3% month-over-month in April. Under the hood, prices for final demand services rebounded 0.1% in May, reversing the 0.7% plunge in April, which was the largest decline since the index began in December 2009, driven by portfolio management services. Taking a closer look at the components, the index for final demand services inched up 0.1% in May, following a 0.4% decrease in April. The advance was attributable to a 0.4% rise in margins for final demand trade services. The trade indexes measure changes in margins received by wholesalers and retailers. In contrast, prices for final demand transportation and warehousing services declined 0.2%, while the index for final demand services less trade, transportation, and warehousing was unchanged. Leading the increase in prices for final demand services in May, margins for machinery and vehicle wholesaling jumped 2.9%. The indexes for travel or accommodation services, apparel, footwear, and accessories, retailing, alcohol retailing, and system software publishing also moved higher. Conversely, prices for airline passenger services fell 1.1%. The indexes for furniture retailing, securities brokerage, dealing, investment advice, and related services and portfolio management also decreased. Prices for final demand goods rose spot 2% in May after edging out spot 1% in April. Over 80% of the May advance can be traced to The index for final demand goods, less food and energy, which climbed 0.2%. Prices for final demand foods increased 0.1%, while the index for final demand energy was unchanged. Within the index for final demand goods, prices for tobacco products rose 0.9%. The indexes for gasoline, processed poultry, roasted coffee, residential natural gas, and oilseeds also increased. In contrast, prices for jet fuel declined 8.2%. The indexes for pork and carbon steel scrap also fell. Margin pressure remains on American corporations, which confirms that companies are eating tariff costs. In other words, and this is Zero Hedge's political commentary, despite all the FUD, companies are soaking up any tariff price increases and not passing them on to consumers. Well, so far that is true. So far that is true to some extent. Companies are taking the hit, not people. I don't think it's necessarily a good thing that companies are making less money overall, but they were the ones that were benefiting from globalization at the expense of everyday Americans. So I guess that's what we should expect to see happen when the tariffs come in, huh? And again, since we're going to have a 55% tariff on China, it's not actually going away like maybe some people thought. Where would you rank the AP in the bias spectrum? They're very liberal. I guess if I were to like rank them on a scale, I might find that they're not as liberal as I think. But I think that the thing that is notable about AP is that they're really supposed to be like an industry standard outfit, and that you would expect to be neutral, and they very much so aren't. They have been one of the leaders of political narrative pushing. So that's why I view them as very left. You know, I don't necessarily, I'm not one of these guys that expects all news sources to be even, right? I kind of think that everybody has a bias, and that it's probably better for people to understand the biases of different news outlets and be able to gather information from multiple sources and make decisions for themselves, right? But the problem is that we have a bunch of people out there selling this lie that there is such a thing as neutral outlets. And then we have outlets trying to position themselves as neutral outlets when they're not. I use all sides to get my news. That's interesting. Yeah, I've been to that website a few times, but most of the, and I get they're trying to give both sides and stuff, but what it really ends up doing is giving you a bunch of news headlines that aren't very relevant. That's okay. All right, here comes the layoffs. Jobless claims rise to an 8-month high as continuing claims unexpectedly soar. The number of Americans filing for jobless benefits for the first time jumped to 247K last week, above the 239 expected, the highest since October of 2024. Okay, that's not that far back, but a breakdown of the weekly claims finds widespread increase in weekly claims filings, with the biggest increases in California, Minnesota, and Pennsylvania, and the biggest drops in Kentucky and North Dakota. Commenting on the result, South Bay Research writes, "Here comes the layoffs," and notes that if you expected white-collar layoffs in IT, healthcare, pharma, and DEI, these states would probably show it. To wit, California plus 9K initial claims, plus 31K continuing claims. Massachusetts plus 2K and 8K continuing. New York plus 2K and 4K continuing. Washington 0.5K and plus 4K continuing. Continuing claims not only remained above the 1.9 million Americans level for the third week in a row, but unexpectedly spiked to the highest level since November 2021 at 1.956 million, well above the 1.9 million expected. And of course, if you go back to before that, then it was during COVID significantly higher than the 1.9K or whatever. With the Dodge-inspired tri-state region seeing claims surge to their highest since December 2021. So despite Musk's obvious disappointment at the One Big Beautiful Bill's lack of spending cuts, he can be proud that he did his part to shrink the workforce of the Leviathan. And that's all that they have there. I'm looking at all sides bias ranking for AP, and they also show AP as far left. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so maybe it is as far left as I think it is. I love it because it'll siphon out the main idea and then show the headlines from the left and right, and the differences is stark. Oh yeah, it totally is. Like the way that the way that the headlines are constructed is really wild to me sometimes. From Carter, immigration crackdown already showing up in the labor market, and from the left, there they back down. Trump's targeting of illegal immigrants threatens health sector. Cracking down on illegal immigration would raise wages for lower income Americans. It seems to me, I've read a couple of things about, what happens in these situations, and it does kind of seem to me that if you have less illegal immigration, that in order to make that up, you have to have basically more teenagers working. Which wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. I don't know. I guess the issue that I always have with these sorts of things is that the effects are complex, right? Like, people will say illegal immigration has a net benefit to the economy. And I think at the highest level that may be true, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't harm some people underneath, right? And maybe benefit some people more than others, right? And so then if we're going to go the other way, you got the same thing. Some people benefit from it, some people don't. And who those people are and everything is a complicated thing to sort out, to actually, it's not so clear to say that it's objectively a good thing or a bad thing. I kind of think that the main reason that we're doing it is not because we can prove that it's good or bad, but because, we want there to be rule of law. And if they're not following the law, then we should change that, right? That's probably the main driver in most people's minds behind why we're doing it. In other words, there is not any complexity research on this subject that I'm aware of to give me a guide as to what would be the policy prescription. They use Wall Street Journal as the center. I would say that is mostly fair, but more so because the Wall Street Journal is really about providing information to professionals. Yeah. So that's always been my argument, is that you get better information, you get better news when you go to news sources that are providing news to people that need it to do their work, rather than when they're delivering news to people that are mostly using it for entertainment. I don't think that most people that watch Fox News, for instance, consider it entertainment. They think it's important for me to be informed about the world and I want to know what's going on. But the reality is you don't need it to make decisions in your job. And so why are you watching it? It's for you. Ergo, it should be classified as entertainment. And that makes outlets like Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, CNBC better sources of information on things. Except for that, sometimes they just don't provide very much information on certain news stories. Like, I don't know if I would really get very good info about LA riots on CNBC. Do they have a story about it on CNBC right now? This would be interesting. CNBC.com. Yeah, I don't see anything on here. Trump wanted an Iran nuclear deal fast. Now he may get a military confrontation. I'm really concerned about the Iran situation. But then I also remind myself, well, the way that this usually happens is everybody gets uppity about it, and then there is some sort of a strike, and that's it. And everybody forgets about it. And so, like, the treasuries spike up, and then that's, like, immediately when you should sell. And so, well, what's on CNN? Oh, they're talking about a jet. Oh, yes, because Boeing is down today because of that. The next product will be the most important Tesla they have ever produced, and he says, is it the taxi? Well, here we go. Somebody on Reddit wearing a linen shirt. Is it a linen shirt? Looks like, yes, it is a linen shirt. That looks like a linen shirt to me. Where he's got the European look going on. Listen, I'm telling you guys, if you haven't tried linen out. Because here's the thing. Scratch my nose here. So here's the thing that I think happens, especially like if you're, well, if you're at any desk job, but especially you programmers out there, right? Like, have you ever seen this happen? Your buddy, he's like maybe thinking about getting into Rust or whatever, spending a little bit more time at the screen, and before you know it, he's wearing cat ears and a skirt. Yes, he has just fallen into the femboy pipeline. And you know what? Like, listen, I mean, if your problem is that you think you're actually a girl, I don't know what to do with that. I'm the wrong person to talk to. But I understand the why people are gravitated to it, because your balls get hot. They do. They get hot, guys. It happens. And that is what traps people into the femboy pipeline. So what do you do about it? Do you get a Herman Miller chair? Well, that does help, because the Herman Miller chair kind of gets more airflow up in that area because it's the fabric and everything, okay? But the Herman Miller chairs don't really have the best lumbar support, and it doesn't make that big of a difference. So what do you have to do? Wear linen, folks. Linen shorts, linen shirts, heck, even linen. I haven't tried linen underwear, but it kind of sounds amazing to me. And you might think, well, but linen is not really a very comfortable fabric. It is. You just have to wear it a little bit. Wear it for a month or two. It will kind of mold to your body. The fabric gets soft, and I'm telling you, man, the ventilation, it pulls the heat away from you. So linen fibers are actually hollow as opposed to other fabric fibers. So it's like millions of little heat pipes pulling the heat away from you. If you fill your shirt, right, it's just, it just feels normal temperature because your body's heating it up a little bit, right? But if you fill your shirt and it's a linen shirt, it always feels cool to the touch. So that's what you got to do. And that's how you avoid falling into the... Try the linen, folks. It's great stuff. You sound like my girlfriend. She's Colombian and nagging me to get linen shirts. It really is. Really is. Uniqlo has some great stuff. I'm not so there's a lot of brands that have it, and every time I see them, I'm kind of like, oh, okay, because some of them seem like really generic brands, but it doesn't matter. Linen's linen, I guess, as long as it's 100% linen. I don't know if I'm sold yet on some of these blends so that it doesn't wrinkle as much, because I don't know, I feel like it loses the charm. But especially in hot climates, I think people have neglected linen. I think that, you know, they're sitting there, it's like, it's too hot. What am I going to do? Like, is there some tech fiber that can help wick the sweat away from me and everything? No. Techwear is just a ruse to get you to pay more for polyester. What you really want is linen. And you know what else? If we were growing more flax as opposed to some of the other crops out there that we're spending so much resource, like here in Utah, it's barley. Barley's a cash crop. They make a lot of money exporting the barley to China. But it uses so much water. It's so bad for the Utah environment. It'd be like 20 times less water if they were growing flax. I was hoping that was going to take us to the end of the stream, but apparently that rant didn't go as far as... But it did get Uzi to go WTF, which was kind of the point, so... Back to 111 even. By the way... the cost basis, I'm just sitting here eating grapes. Like, okay, Seth, you say whatever the heck you want, but it sounds crazy to me. Cost basis is down at 30 half. So maybe a little bit further of a drop here. Could be an interesting play. And I don't know if it's a very worthwhile one. So it's only 2 ticks, but hey. Now, the bigger play is probably wait until the auction. I think I'm still on the side of a buy. You buy it now, or maybe you buy it just before the auction because we might move a little bit lower. But regardless of what the results of the auction are, probably after that it rises. You know, like if the auction does happen and it's really bad and the results of it are really bad, you know, I would take that opportunity to buy the dip. Because usually afterwards the flows are long. I can't say for sure that that's what it's going to do this time, but if you were to buy it after every time, you would be a net winner. So. Gold just had a kind of a odd little move up and then back down here. And SPOOs seem to be doing okay. Actually, let's come and look at SPOOs on a larger term chart here. Well, so a little bit before the open has been good, but that was mostly just erasing some of the downside action that happened in the middle of the night. So we're still a good step lower than we were yesterday. Google is showing that it was an Airbus aircraft that crashed today in India. That's weird. How do I get into Apple as a new grad in the USA? Okay, so you know what happened? One of the things that happened that's weird that I think we need to binge on is part of the changes that are going on with the company I'm working with right now. The owner came in and kind of gave a little bit more flavor to their vision, and it was not what I expected, because he basically said, like, I want to be thought of in the same vein as Apple in terms of being really creating really good user interfaces that are beautiful and intuitive. And at first I thought, well, that seems kind of cliche, isn't it? Like, doesn't every rich person want to be like Steve Jobs? But then I thought, well, but it does fit in with what they're trying to do. They're making software for teachers. It does need to be really easy to use. Apple probably is the right analog. Here's the problem. I don't really like Apple products. I like power. I like power and flow. Sometimes those things contradict each other, but I err on the side of power. And, Apple's the opposite. Sometimes Apple will give up power in order to create a more intuitive thing, right? So now I feel that I need to research how Apple did what they did. Like, what was it about the culture in Apple, and how did they create the culture in Apple that led to them being able to create really beautiful and intuitive user interfaces? You know? So I guess I need to find a book about it. Well, so our robot should be, you know what? Yes, it's trying to take a long one. It should be taking a short here. So I think I'm going to disable the strategy.
Order canceled. Order filled.
Because I left it running from yesterday. I never restarted it, so it didn't pick up the fix that we made. Design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. There you go. But I'm more interested in culture things, I think. How do you create that culture? All right. So maybe you guys have some book ideas for me next time, huh? Today is Thursday, right? Man, can you believe it's already Thursday? I guess the 15th falls on a weekend, so I should probably submit time tomorrow too. All right. Well, guys, I will see you tomorrow. I don't know if we're going to have anything too interesting happening tomorrow, but maybe we can get back into the CR charts thing, right? So I will see you then. In the meantime, stay excellent.